I talk about it every single day. The biggest story happening in this country is the government shutdown, but it is boring. It just is. It's boring to talk about it every day. You know that the left is going to say the right did it. The right is going to say the left did it. I mean, by the facts, of course, the Democrats in the Senate, they're the ones that have to get to 60 because all the Republicans, except for, I think, Rand Paul right now, are voting for this continuing resolution. I want some economic questions. We're going to get some, or I have some. We're going to get some answers from Vance Ginn, PhD, VanceGinn.com, former chief economist in Trump 1.0. Vance, good to see you again. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well, Joe. Always a pleasure to be with you.
You know, I haven't talked to you about this, but we agree that the Democrats have to vote more in the Senate to get the CR passed, right? I mean, there's no doubt this shutdown is on them, right?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, whenever you think about the Republicans brought to them a clean CR. What does that mean? It just meant that whatever the Democrats had already passed under Biden, they were just going to continue that, which should be a no-brainer for the Democrats to go ahead and sign on to. In fact, you know, Joe, I was questioning whether or not the Republicans should have consented and allowed for more spending at that Biden level. But then the Democrats said, you know what, we want $1.5 trillion more dollars for healthcare spending to crowd out the productive private sector and make the healthcare system worse. Yes, part of it was for illegal aliens, but it's also including a lot of people that were on temporary COVID restriction or credits that they received during that period, whether they incomed out or aged out, that they would keep Medicaid. They would keep those Medicaid benefits. And that was just nonsense. It should have been temporary only during COVID. The Biden administration, Joe, they even ended the emergency declaration that extended that. But the Democrats want to continue this nonsense of giving people who shouldn't otherwise be eligible for Medicaid more money for Medicaid and bankrupting the economy and bankrupting the federal government even more. This is a bad idea. And now we're set up in a federal shutdown that's on the back of Democrats.
Yeah, without a doubt. You know, I'm glad that you went there because the Democrats are the ones that put the subsidies in with an expiration date of December 31st this year. The Democrats literally did that, and now they're voting and acting or fighting and acting as if they've got leverage to extend that, and they're blaming the Republicans for it ending. No, the Democrats put it in place. But you really hit on something that I want to expand upon a second. How much spending was added because of the pandemic? What was it, $2 trillion, something like that? And wasn't it always earmarked to go away as soon as the pandemic was over?
Yes. I mean, it was at least $2 trillion because you had the CARES Act, you had all these different acts that went through. I mean, I think it's closer to probably $5 or $6 trillion if you added it all up. But you're right. This was supposed to be a temporary measure. All of that should have been temporary, Joe. Well, you know, whenever I was in the Trump White House the first time around, up until 2020, the budget for fiscal year 2021 that I helped write was $4.6 trillion. Okay. Well, today the budget still is $7 trillion, even after the huge, expansion, a lot of money printing and everything else during the COVID time. And now we're still spending too much. It's one of the reasons why I think many fiscal conservatives were like, why don't we move back to the 2019 levels of spending, go back before COVID, and then start to restrain the growth of government? We'd have a lot more for reducing the deficits and debt, helping with the current account, the trade imbalances as well. And so this is another example of the overspending from Congress. And it's been a bipartisan problem for a number of years. But this one, I think, falls right on the back of Democrats because they want to increase the budget $1.5 trillion more dollars on credits for Medicaid that should have already ended.
It is Vance Ginn. Go to VanceGinn.com, PhD. He's a great economist. It was in the Trump White House the first time around, and great insight as always. So when something like this happens and you increase spending because of an emergency, the pandemic certainly was an emergency. I get it. You increase the spending by $2 trillion or more, but it's supposed to go away. When you're in the White House and when you're working on a budget like you have, do you know in the back of your mind that if we give them this increased spending, they're never going to give it back? Because they're not. Vance, they're just not. If they get their hands on the money, they're going to keep on spending the money, and they'll find ways to spend it. And if you dare say, let's bring it back, even if they agreed in the beginning, they're going to do what Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer are doing today, claiming that evil people like you and Trump and me want to take away $1.5 trillion in health insurance. When you make the budget, do you know going in it's going to be really hard to get this money back?
I think you do. I mean, I think that's one of the concerns that many of us had within the White House of the CARES Act and other things when that started during COVID, of how expansive that they were. with all these tax rebates that they did and a lot of other expansions, by Congress, those were likely to continue. We hoped, I'll put it this way, we hoped that they would be temporary. But to your point, it's difficult to get this stuff started. Once you get somebody high on that sugar, if you will, or something else, then it continues. And unfortunately, that's what we've seen during this period, this sugar high from the expansion of Medicaid. And Joe, the other thing is that there are about 10 states that have not expanded Medicaid under Obamacare. And this forced them to expand, not under their own criteria or under their own ruling, but by federal government decree, at the same time that they're having to spend more at the state level on something they never wanted. And so I think that this is another reason for returning back to normal, because even the states are starting to feel the brunt of this higher cost on them as well.
It is Vance Ginn, PhD. Go and check him out. It's at Vance Ginn on X as well, right, Vance?
That's right.
Go follow him right now. Let's talk about the actual healthcare stuff, the subsidy stuff. The lie is that no federal dollars are going to give healthcare to illegal aliens. That's untrue. If they walk into the emergency room, the taxpayers pay for their healthcare. But even in blue states like California, and I'm sure several others, what they're doing is some tax scam. Let me explain it and see if you probably already know what I'm about to say, but I've been explaining this to my audience for the past week. They're taxing healthcare providers in California. They're taking that tax money and they're giving healthcare to illegal aliens in California. Then California gets a subsidy from the federal government and gives a tax rebate to the people they just taxed. So they're taking from Peter, the federal government, to pay Paul, those who are giving healthcare to illegal aliens, although the money doesn't go straight from the feds to the illegal aliens, and that's why they're claiming that no illegal is getting any healthcare. Did I describe it right? Are they doing that in all the blue states where they're fake taxing healthcare providers, then just giving them the money back from the feds?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of truth to that. And I don't remember how many states are doing it, but I know California is definitely doing that, because they actually passed a bill that said that they were going to fund illegal aliens in Medicaid. And so you're right. They come in, they give these tax credits and other things that are going on. They can also bring down more federal funds, because the way that Medicaid works, right, it was created in 1965, and it's funded mostly by the federal government and a lot of the operations through this what they call federal matching assistance program. So the state will pay for a small portion of whoever's eligible, and then the federal government, meaning us, the taxpayers, will socialize those costs across the United States. And a lot of that's going to California. I live in Texas. Well, Texas has an expanded Medicaid through Obamacare, and they didn't provide it for illegal aliens. So that federal funding is not going to Texas directly. Now, to your point, they may be paying for some of the out-of-pocket expenses that aren't being paid at hospitals and other things. That might go there for sure, but it's not part of the eligibility, the number of people who are on the rolls of Medicaid, like it is in California. And so in other words, more conservative states, red states in particular, are actually funding a lot more, subsidizing even more from these blue states like California. It's just unheard of, and it's not the way the system is supposed to work. And if we're going to have people be here and they're here illegally, why are we funding them through these Medicaid type of programs? Milton Friedman always says you can't have unlimited immigration and a welfare state. And I think we should really be going after that welfare state, whether it be for Americans or for foreigners, because those are incentives that are creating us more dependency on the government relative to, the private sector and working and having that dignity that comes along with work.
Why are so many able-bodied people getting Medicaid? Was that because of the pandemic? Anybody and everybody who needed it would get it. It was supposed to be temporary. And now when Trump comes in and says, through DOGE, we're spending billions, if not trillions, on people who are able-bodied, let's add a work requirement if you want to get Medicaid. Let's add an eligibility requirement if you're not watching kids who are under 14 years old or whatever. But I guess the initial question, let me go back to what I first said. Why are people who are able-bodied getting it to begin with? Was it because of COVID?
Yes, primarily from COVID. When Medicaid was created and before COVID, it's usually your mothers, those who are pregnant mothers. That's the word I was looking for. Also, those who are on disability, a lot of children, and the very poor. Those are really the core criteria for Medicaid. And now it's expanded to like 20% of the population, mainly through COVID-related bills and also expansions under the Biden administration from their rules, along with what is happening in places like California. But the issue here is that, yes, they're able-bodied or work capable. They are able to do some work. Yeah. It's not only that, Joe, it's also that their ages. For example, when you're 18 and you had it as a kid and you moved to 19, you would be off of Medicaid. Well, they exempted, they suspended all those type of rules for ages, even if you got older out of the bracket as well. The other thing is on income. So you have a certain income levels based on federal poverty level, those sort of annual incomes, whether or not you should be on Medicaid or not, based on the eligibility criteria. Well, that too didn't exist for so long, and that's why we have whatever they say, 20 plus million people who have been added during that period onto Medicaid because of those suspensions that were temporary suspensions under COVID emergency declarations. Now those are gone, which is why these people would now be off of Medicaid. So, you have Senator Bernie Sanders, you have Governor Gavin Newsom and others saying, well, the Republicans are trying to kick people off of Medicaid. Well, no, it's trying to get back to a sense of normal. This is what Medicaid was intended to be, and it has become something much more expansive, which is also why they want to get to nationalized health care. I mean, this is really a way for them to get to universal health care, create as many people on the program so that whenever you try to reduce it to get it back to normal, that you have all this push against doing that because they've already made so many people dependent on this government program.
Former chief economist of the Trump White House, the first time around, it's Vance Ginn, PhD. Go follow him at Vance Ginn. Go to vanceginn.com. Go check him out there, too. We're talking about all this stuff that should be negotiated between the House and the Senate right now. They're not doing that. They should be negotiating this before it expires at the end of the year. And we should get, as you said, some sense of normal, or I think William Howard Taft said some sense of normalcy. But I want people watching and listening to understand, this is all on the periphery. That has nothing to do with why the government is shut down. When a clean CR is offered, one that the Democrats all agreed to last time and the time before, the same exact spending, no more, no less, that should be a no-brainer. Now we start arguing about what came out in the one big beautiful bill. What they're actually arguing about is what was stripped out of that bill, right? They took out all of this extra money. They stripped back the Medicaid. You put a work requirement in there. You got rid of illegals getting any sort of benefit like that as well. And for some reason, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries think this is the time when you could just pass a CR, a clean CR. This is the time to negotiate that. Do you have any idea, any thoughts, any opinions as to why they're picking the fight now when they've got more than 2 months before it expires? They could have argued about this after passing the CR.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Speaker Mike Johnson, the Republican, right, has been saying from Louisiana. He's been saying, well, let's get through with this clean CR first, and then we'll move to this discussion about healthcare because we have some of these expirations of those at the end of the year. And some of it won't expire actually until the end of 2026. But the Democrats don't want that to expire at all because they want as much expansion of these programs as possible. So I guess what it comes down to is Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, and others somehow, I don't know how, but they feel like they have some sort of leverage here, that if they can get as many people upset about this, that the continuing resolution would expand those programs that were just voted on to end within the one big beautiful bill just a few months ago. Now they want to overturn that. And so my thinking is that they're losing this argument. And they want to find a way to bring their side to the table, whatever that means, which really means expansion of government and people that you shouldn't be on Medicaid. And I guess they feel like this is the right time to do it. I mean, I think it's a bad ploy for them. I think that they're going to be hurt when it comes to the elections. And that's the other thing too, is I think many of them want to run on this. They fought hard in order to keep Medicaid expanded, and somehow Trump and the Republicans were the ones who didn't want it to happen. And so that might also be part of their play as political messaging going into the midterms next year.
Well, they have no leverage whatsoever. In fact, it already passed the House, yet for some reason AOC shows up on CNN and says, Mike Johnson won't even meet with Hakeem Jeffries. Why should he? It already passed the House of Representatives. There's nothing to negotiate. And then the Senate, Chuck Schumer yesterday said, I think that Hakeem Jeffries and I should meet with the president again. Now, the president loves negotiating. He likes making a good deal. There literally is no deal to be made. The Republicans can't do any more, except maybe Rand Paul can vote for it, and he keeps saying no. But you have 3 Democrats, 2 independent, well, 1 independent, and 2 Democrats voting with the Republicans now. You need 5 more Democrats to vote for it. What exactly do you think Chuck Schumer thinks he can negotiate with the president? And again, the president likes to be the chief negotiator, and he's great at it. But what can he even offer? Republicans will vote for it more if you know what I mean? You've already got all the Republicans. The House has already passed it. What do you think? Is he just looking to save face, do you think, Vance?
I think so. Yeah, because otherwise you can't get to 60. The math is pretty simple, as you just laid out well there, Joe. I mean, I don't think that they really have any – there's nothing on the table that seems to me that they're going to win in this. And the vast majority of times when these sort of shutdowns happen from one side or the other, they don't end up getting what they want. They will eventually give in to the other side. So I think the Democrats won't get anything from this other than political talking points after this period is over, at the same time influencing many people's lives. I mean, there's some people saying, well, this is the cost of $15 billion a day for the shutdowns across the economy. Many of the federal government employees, maybe up to 1 million of them, have been furloughed or will get one of these rifts where they're let go. But we also have to remember, Joe, is that in past shutdowns, those who are furloughed and everything else, they just get reimbursed for that time.
Right.
And so they won't lose that money. It will just shift. We might not see a huge impact, them having their economic impact here in the month of October, but then it'll just shift to November. So the fourth quarter won't actually be hit that hard because of those shifts that happen. If there was a way to really let go of more of these workers, we actually should see less government spending in the future, which would also help our deficits and debt. I'm concerned about some of that because of how much just ties that there are with labor unions and other things with federal employees, of how much that Russ Vought, my former boss, can allow for these temporary rifts and everything else to actually be permanent. I'm hopeful that they can, but it's going to be an uphill battle, I think, with courts and everything else.
Yeah, it is Vance Ginn, PhD, former chief economist at the White House under Trump 1.0. We're now in Trump 2.0. I want to go down the rabbit hole with you a little bit, if you don't mind. Have you got a minute? Yeah. When exactly did the United States decide we're going to spend more money than we bring in? Remember, we own Alaska because Russia had to pay its war debt. Russia couldn't just spend money it didn't have and then just say, we'll just have $38 trillion in debt. No, they had to pay off what it was that cost them in the war. When we used to go to war, we would be selling bonds to United States citizens, and those sales of the bonds told them, yes, we want to fight the war and win, or no, we don't. Now we just go fight it. We've got $1 trillion a year, budget for the DOD or the Department of War, and that money doesn't really exist yet because we're in debt. So back to my initial question: when was it in this country that we decided we'll start spending money we don't have? Because it didn't used to be that way.
No, you're right, Joe. I mean, the founding fathers, I believe, will be rolling in their graves right now. Maybe they are, given the situation that we're in. It's a great question. I mean, yes, you have different war periods where there was excess spending compared to taxes, and we issued debt and we paid for it that way. They also would raise tax rates pretty frequently in order to bring in more revenue and things of that nature. You have to go back really to President Jackson. And back in what was
We're going back to Andrew Jackson?
Andrew Jackson
was
the last time that we paid down our debt, which was also when he closed the second bank of the United States, the National Bank.
Okay.
And so they did both of those during that period. And since then, of course, you had the Civil War, so there was a lot more debt there. It took it on from the states and everything else. And then you had World War I, World War II. The last president that really made good headway in bringing down the debt, you have to go back to Calvin Coolidge 100 years ago, where they were actually cutting taxes and cutting spending. When Calvin Coolidge was in the 20s, when him and Harding, the amount of government spending was actually lower in nominal and real terms, inflation-adjusted terms, than whenever they entered after 8 years. And so I think that's the sort of thing that we need to be looking at again, so you have a period of economic growth and less government spending, and we could really start bringing down this balance. But to answer your question, though, I mean, it's been a long time. I mean, this has really been going on for a while. I think the Federal Reserve, when they created that again in 1913, that allowed for them to buy bonds and put money into circulation. And we've seen the results of higher inflation, but that also reduced the cost to people because now the Fed can just buy the bonds to keep interest rates low compared to the private sector.
It's also messed up. It's hard to understand. It's Vance Ginn. He makes it understandable. Go and follow him at Vance Ginn. Go to vanceginn.com right now. Let me talk about Bill Clinton's era. Bill Clinton,
Okay.
I thought we had a surplus. We certainly were balancing the budget because Newt Gingrich basically said you have to. And as the Speaker of the House, he actually had some backbone. The Senate also forced him to do it. I think Bill Clinton would have been a more liberal and a more progressive president had he not read the writing on the wall, which he did very well, and had he not realized that, okay, I've got to work with this House and Senate. If I don't, my legacy is going to be nothing. Did we balance the budget then? Was there a surplus then? Or to your point, were we still building the size of government even though we were spending less?
Yeah, I was actually talking to somebody about Bill Clinton today, where I think he may have been one of the best presidents without the Monica Lewinsky stuff and some other things going on, because fiscally he was more conservative. I do agree with you, though, that the Republican Revolution with Newt Gingrich, it forced him into that direction even more. But there were some good things that were going on at that time. But there were these 4 years, was it 98, 99, 2000, and 2001, right before the dot-com crash and 9/11 and all that, where we actually ran surpluses. Now, if you look at the micro, which is what I like to do, is get into the budget and dig in there, Joe.
Yeah.
What you found is that we just traded off some debt, the shorter-term debt for long-term debt. So that way the interest rates were lower. We actually didn't pay down the national debt, which is what I would consider to be a true surplus, is when you pay down the national debt.
Right.
So they just shifted some of the bonds around. It did reduce the longer-term cost of our debt, though, by getting those lower interest rates. And so, I think it's kind of a mixed bag. Yes, the revenue is greater than spending because they were able to restrain government spending, and we had a long period of economic growth. But at the same time, they used it to pay off some debt and issue new debt. So it's almost like rolling over debt. And so I think there could have been a better way of going about that, probably because the Democrats were in the Treasury and making those decisions. But I do think there's a lot of evidence that period was so robust and had so much prosperity because of the limited government spending, by getting people back to work. When you think about the 1996 welfare reforms that were put in place of work requirements, I think that's what I think many in the Republican Party and the One Big Beautiful Bill and the Trump administration are trying to push in that direction. And I can only help advocate for more of that because I think that's more of what we need.
It is Vance Ginn. Vance very well said, and I wanted to understand it. So, in other words, they had a surplus. They did balance the budget, but with the surplus, they spent more, and instead of paying down the debt that would actually be real debt pay down, they paid it down just to build it up even more. So we didn't see a decrease in the national debt under Bill Clinton?
Correct. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
But it was nowhere near $38 trillion. When did this happen? Why are we at $38 trillion? If you had to give a paragraph or two answer as to why we're at $38 trillion, what the hell happened?
Man, just excessive government spending. I mean, really short is that it's really been since 2008. The financial crisis of 2008, all these bank bailouts and stuff like that started. And then it was like, okay, we spent $800 billion on this bill. Now it's been $1 trillion. Then COVID hit and it was $2 trillion a year in these different bills. So really the vast majority of our national debt, I think maybe $20 trillion of it has just been since 2008.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, it indicates how much excess spending is going on, which is why I think you and I were so excited about DOGE to come in, start to weed out all this nonsense and really make some big cuts. But it also showed of how difficult that it is, Joe, to make those cuts. You have the smartest people in the world with Elon Musk coming in and stuff like that, and it's still very frustrating given the amount of regulatory tape, the inertia, the budget inertia of just growing government, given the baseline that we're on. And I really think we need to start looking at what we call zero-based budgeting in economic and accounting terms, getting into and zeroing out a lot of these programs and saying, do we really need these programs? Are these really roles for government? And we need a huge rethink of that. And maybe something like the DOGE could do that eventually, but you've got to start somewhere. That's why I'm glad they at least started with a lot of the, weeding out some of these contracts and other things that just the government shouldn't be a part of. What
is the baseline now? Is it 8%? For some reason, 8% sticks in my head.
I think that's about, it kind of goes around, but I think 8% is about right.
Should there be any increase, automatic increase every year at all? Like you said, you'd like to make it a 0% baseline. So in other words, I mean, for those watching and listening, let's say the number is 8. every year the government automatically gets a spending increase of 8%. I'm not seeing that in my pay. Real wages aren't growing that way. It's actually way higher than inflation is. So what is that all about? When was there a specific moment in time when that happened as well? Let's just automatically put a baseline increase every year.
Yeah, I mean, part of it really, I think, started in the 1960s. If I have to really go back and think about it, is that you had the Medicare and Medicaid acts, right? CMS and everything put in place in 1965, and that started this more autopilot, the budget kept growing. Yeah. I mean, some of the areas like national defense, transportation, other areas that are not Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, which you could call more of discretionary part of the budget, those actually haven't been growing as fast. It's the quote unquote entitlements, the mandatory payments to Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. That has really been what's driving the government spending really over the last 30, 40 years, maybe even longer, maybe 60 years if we go all the way back to 1965. Right. And the problem, Joe, is that there's no end in sight. I mean, those areas, if we don't have some key reforms like what the president's trying to do with Medicaid and the One Big Beautiful Bill and so forth, we're going to continue to see massive government spending. And so what I've been pushing for a lot is to say, let's have a different guideline, not the 8%, but let's use maybe population growth plus inflation as a simple metric, as a maximum growth rate. I'd love for it to be even lower than that, but have something that's a rules-based policy instead of a rule that we're just going to grow government by whatever we spent last year and increase it by X. That's a terrible way to budget, and it's a terrible way to run the federal government with our taxpayer money.
Vance, is it really over 60% to entitlements every year out of our spending? 60 plus? I've heard it 68. Let's say 60. Is it really that?
Yes.
So the money that's fleeced from everybody watching and listening, from you and me, that money, 60% of that money is going to just let somebody else have some free stuff.
Yes.
Come on, man.
Yep.
And again, if we say we're going to bring that down, people start screaming from the highest mountain, you're going to take away my food and the kids can't eat. And what about grandma's Medicare? And why are you throwing her over the cliff? I mean, we have to get through the messaging and really hone in on the fact that 60 cents on every dollar we send in is going to just prop somebody else up. That was the initial intention of the founders. I don't want to go back. We can't rehash the entire thing since the revolution, but the founders never meant for government to be in the business of entitlements, did they? I thought it was faith-based organizations that were supposed to be the ones doing charity.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And it continued to expand during the progressivist era. That kind of started some with Theodore Roosevelt in the early, around that time. And then you had Woodrow Wilson that came in and he was really wanting to expand. And FDR, of course, was on steroids from what Wilson did. And so, I mean, there were all these huge expansions that I agree the founders would never have wanted that to happen. And it's unfortunate that the Supreme Court has let so much of this continue. I mean, they've really got to start taking a look at this because, Joe, there's a lot of issues that are going on. And to me, the biggest national crisis is our debt, because the larger the debt gets, the interest rate volatility influences the economy. The more the Fed's likely to print money and run up inflation, and it makes us weaker against our foreign adversaries like China and Russia and others, because we can't get our own fiscal house in order. And so I think this is a huge problem that we've got to come to grips with. The other problem is that many people don't want to talk, and you mentioned this, Joe, about Social Security and Medicare type of reforms.
Right.
But I would rather us not wait till the crisis hits.
Yeah,
I'd rather us start doing something now. Social Security is said to be essentially bankrupt by 2032. That's only 7 years from now, where they would cut benefits by 25% compared to what people are expected to receive. So do we want those people to get 25% cut, or actually find a way to allow for people to have private saving accounts if they want them, have more control over their own future compared to giving it to government, because that never works.
I couldn't agree more. It's Vance Ginn. Vance, I appreciate all the time. I wanted to get into some of that stuff. I'm going to do 2 parts on this for those watching and listening. There'll be a nice 2-part deal for you later on YouTube. Let me finish with this. John McCain historically walked out, did the thumbs down at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to not get rid of Obamacare. And the question I get most when I'm on like TikTok Live and got thousands of people in the chat room, somebody invariably will say, okay, you don't want Obamacare anymore. I get it. What's the Republican plan? So let's say John McCain would have said thumbs up. Let's kill Obamacare and get rid of it. What would have happened? Is there a plan that makes sense? And again, I don't want socialized medicine. I want those who are really in need to be taken care of by us. But those who aren't really in need, go get your own health insurance. And I think the prices went through the roof. The insurance companies were like, whistling Dixie. They couldn't wait to get this money because now basically government was mandating you buy something that the insurance companies are offering, and they put everybody in the exchange. So again, long story short, John McCain doesn't do the thumbs down. He actually says, yes, let's get rid of Obamacare. What happens then? What if it goes away?
Well, if they would have got rid of Obamacare then it would just went to where it was before, where you could still buy catastrophic health insurance if you don't go to the doctor very often, which is what I used to do before I had kids and everything else. Instead of mandating that everybody get essentially the same health insurance policy, meaning we're all paying that premium for the folks who aren't exercising or living well. We're paying for that and socializing those costs now through much higher premiums, which is why Obamacare was always going to fail. But I do think, looking back on that, I do think the Republicans put themselves in a bad position. I think they should have come out with better reforms. I've been working on something that I've now called the Empower Patients Initiative. I just wrote a book that I co-authored with Dr. Dean Waldman called Empower Patients, the Two Doctors Cure for Healthcare, where we go in and we really talk about how the problem with healthcare is a third-party payer system. The private insurance is a third party and the government is a third party, and you have less interaction between patients and doctors. And so I think we need to get rid of Obamacare and a lot of the other rules and regulations that are within the healthcare. The other big problem of this, Joe, is going back to the 1940s. We were talking about world wars and everything, is you had price and wage controls during World War II. And so businesses couldn't give out as much in wage increases, right? Because those controls. So they started giving fringe benefits to where we were going to give you health insurance. Well, that's expanded now to the employer-sponsored health insurance tax credit for businesses. It incentivizes the employer to pick your private insurance and where those dollars are going. What we say in our book is that we should end that and give it all to the employee because it's coming out of our paycheck somehow, just through a different mechanism. But then employees, workers, us, could take that money, put it in a no-limit health savings account and use it throughout the year as we see fit, compared with private insurance companies and others. And I think that would truly transform the entire system.
I couldn't agree more. Is that book out now?
Yeah, it's out now, Empower Patients, and we have a report on it, Empower Patients Initiative, over at ATR.org, Americans for Tax Reform. They published the paper on it, and we've got the book out as well. Oh,
Grover's a good guy. Again, give me the name of the book. Can they get it on Amazon?
Not yet. We haven't had the full release yet, but it is on DorancePublishing.com. It's Empower Patients. And it's with Vance, Ginn, and Dean Waldman. Check it out. It's also up on my website. I should mention that, vanceginn.com. You can go right there, and it's on the front page.
Vance, VanceGinn.com. Go and check him out. Vance, I appreciate the extended time today. There's so many questions that I still have, so I'll have to do this again very soon. But thanks for always making time.
Hey, it's always a pleasure, Joe. I look forward to coming back on soon.
All right, brother. We appreciate you. We're back after this. Stay right here.